Hi friends, Jerry Robinson here from TrueRichesRadio.com, back with another question for Jehovah's Witnesses. This time we're asking the question, why do Jehovah's Witnesses trust the New Testament canon? Now, let's talk about how we can use this question when we encounter one of Jehovah's Witnesses to help them see the strange way that they have approached the New Testament through their faith tradition. So let's begin just by understanding that Jehovah's Witnesses in general and their doctrine from on high teaches them that the early church fathers were pagan. In fact, you'll find that they really don't have any hope for the church after the death of the last apostle. When the apostle John dies, according to the tradition, around 100 AD, then at that time, pagan forces come into the church and overwhelm the church to the point where the true church is in essence lost until Charles Taze Russell, the founder of Jehovah's Witnesses, revives it in the 1800s. So therefore, if you ask one of Jehovah's Witnesses if they believe, say, a 4th century church council of the Christian church was binding or official, they will typically say that not necessarily, and they will usually say that those participants were pagan. So they would view most of the early church after the death of the last apostle as being pagan. Because they believe this, and once you know they believe this, this actually gives you the opportunity to ask them about the New Testament. Now remember, the New Testament didn't just fall out of heaven into our laps fully intact. In fact, the entire Bible didn't fall out of heaven into our laps fully intact. There were many arguments about what constituted a divinely inspired book that went into the biblical canon. So when we look back, for example, at the early church, they did not have a list. There was no authoritative list that was given. God didn't give that list. He instead inspired men to write books, and it became incumbent upon the church to decide which books of the Bible, which books belonged in the Bible, which books belonged in the New Testament, which ones were divinely inspired, and which ones were not. Back in the 2nd century, you had a fellow by the name of Marcion who was really doing quite a lot of disservice to the overall biblical canon, and this created the need for the early Christian church to create a biblical canon for what constituted a New Testament book. You don't see the current list that we all enjoy today, the 27 books of the New Testament, which begins with Matthew, ends with Revelation. We don't see a full, complete list of all 27 books until we find a list created by St. Athanasius in 367 AD. And it wasn't until 397 AD at the authoritative Council of Carthage that the early church fathers actually settle on what the books of the New Testament are. And so it's an authoritative list that is first seen by the hand of Athanasius, who was an extremely important church father, especially when it came to the Council of Nicaea. Also, we have the authoritative list in the Council of Carthage in 397 AD. So before that time, there were questions. There were questions as to what belonged in the biblical canon. There's lots of different books that you can include in the New Testament. There is the Apocalypse of Peter, there's the Gospel of Thomas, there's the Gospel of Judas, the Didache, Shepherd of Hermas. I mean, there's many different books that you could have included in the New Testament if you're an early church father. And why did they only include these 27? Well, that's the question that I think really works to your favor as a Christian when you're talking to one of Jehovah's Witnesses. What you want to ask the witness here basically is this: why do you trust the New Testament? Because they're going to tell you that the early church fathers were pagan. If you ask them what they think about the Council of Carthage, they'll tell you that they think that the people there were pagan. They weren't actually Christians. Okay? So what you have is you have the Jehovah's Witnesses accepting and embracing a biblical canon of the New Testament, all 27 books, and taking the word of these quote-unquote pagan church fathers and assuming that that list is true. Notice that the Jehovah's Witness does not question the list of these early church fathers as to what constitutes a New Testament book, as to what was divinely inspired and what wasn't. So the question that you're asking the Jehovah's Witness, and quite frankly, when I talk to Jehovah's Witnesses, I almost have a sense of suspicion here as to why they would trust the 27 books of the New Testament as being A, all belonging in the New Testament, B, whether or not there were other divinely inspired books that were left out by these pagan early church fathers, and C, why they agree with the order of the books. That also is important. Why do Jehovah's Witnesses seem to just lay down on this topic? They're very eager to call the early church pagan. They call the early church fathers pagan. They say that these councils are not authoritative. And yet they are bound by what constitutes the New Testament by an early church council, the Council of Carthage, 397 AD. So why would the Jehovah's Witnesses willingly embrace the New Testament, which contains 27 books that were all settled upon by people who the Jehovah's Witnesses call pagan? You have to say, I'm not sure if I agree with that. I mean, if I'm going to join the cult of Jehovah's Witnesses, I want to know that they've done a little bit of digging. And if they're accepting the very same book, the very same order, the very same books of the New Testament that the people they call pagans settled upon, then they have a great contradiction in their own faith tradition. So that's the question. Ask the Jehovah's Witness why he trusts the New Testament. And oftentimes they'll say, well, it's just the Bible. And you have to constantly remind them when you're talking, I found this anyway, that they almost have this imagination that the Bible just came down from heaven as is, all intact. There was no debate about what book should go in the Bible. That's absolutely absurd and is not the truth. So you want to point to them that, look, God did not send down a Bible from heaven. He actually inspired men to write these books. And there was arguments about what books should be in the Bible. And you're settling with what the pagan early church fathers had to say about it. You're not even challenging it. You're not even questioning it, right? So I think this kind of catches them in their own snare, so to speak, where they're very content to call the early church fathers pagan, but yet they willingly embrace their New Testament, 27 books, as the authoritative list that they settle upon and agree to. It just seems strange that the enlightened Jehovah's Witnesses who have the truth would agree with the pagan early church, right? It's a very powerful question, especially if you make sure to remind the Jehovah's Witness that the Bible did not fly down from heaven intact in its current form, but had to be organized in such a way that we have now today. And that didn't come easy. So by reminding the Jehovah's Witness that this was a struggle and that the struggle was finally ended by a church council in 397 AD, you just have to ask the Jehovah's Witness why he settles for that too. It just doesn't make sense considering that he considers these early church folks to be entirely pagan. Why would he trust them with something so important as the order of the books and the actual list of books in the New Testament? Just another question for you to ask Jehovah's Witnesses when they come to your door, when you talk to them by letter or by phone. I hope that's helpful to you. We'll be back with another question for you as well very soon. God bless, and we'll see you next time.